All right, everybody. Welcome to my camera's a bit too high, everybody. Welcome to Talk Recovery Radio, coming to you live here on Facebook and on CFRO 100.5 FM. And I'm here with my co-host, Mr. Darren Gaylor. Hey, Darren.
How's it going? Good to be here.
Good to be here. Good to be here. Good to see you. Sorry for a bit of a late start, everybody. Some technical difficulties with the whole live thing, but we're coming to you Thursdays, noon to 1, 6 seasons, hundreds of guests, thousands of listeners. Thanks to everybody who listens and watches. Darren and I try to bring as many addiction recovery issues to the airways, and I think we do a pretty good job, Darren?
I do my best. And I've been told my best ain't bad. So
your best ain't bad. Yes. You can catch us on 100.5 FM every week on the radio here in Vancouver Co-op Radio. And then obviously if you're watching us here on our Facebook page, talkrecoveryradio.com, all of our archive shows are on iTunes, YouTube, SoundCloud, and on the website. And Talk Recovery Radio is powered by New West Recovery, Canada's recovery community made up of Last Door Recovery Society and Westminster House. And Darren, we got two awesome guests on the show today. Hey, one's on an angle. Awesome. Darren, who are we talking recovery with today?
We get to, like you said, talk recovery with two different guests. At the second end of our show, we have some women with Recovery Gnome Project. We'll talk a little bit about that. Our first guest, you're a bit sideways still. There you go. There you go. Our first guest is Daniel Snyder. Welcome to Talk Recovery, Daniel.
Hi guys, how are you?
Pretty good. As good as can be right now. Now, a little bit about yourself. You are a project and peer coordinator for the Langley Community Action Table and Overdose Response Project. And you're here to talk about an organization we all play a role, which is education and free overdose training for employers in the Langley Township. Now, this is a big conversation, the background and what you're currently doing. And I'd love to go into, everything about what you've learned. Now, it says you have your own personal story of addiction. Just a quick little premise on that. Like, what'd you use? How long? Just the basics there.
Sure, yeah. Well, my addiction started in my late teens. My drug of choice ended up being opioids, so primarily heroin, and spent 15 years in what I would recall kind of an up and down, back and forth relationship with that drug. I really see addiction is kind of a learned behavior, an unhealthy bonding relationship. And, I remember the first time that I took opioids, the way I felt was, I describe it as normal, right? I actually felt normal, and it seemed to give me the ability to communicate and be social in a way that I didn't feel like I was capable of doing without it. So I traced back kind of the roots of that addiction to some traumatic experiences that took place in my teenage years, and I undervalued their significance for a long period of time. But yeah, 15 years, but free and clear. I don't even consider myself really in recovery anymore. It's behind me. Okay.
We have a very similar, as brief as your history was there, relatable. A heroin addict for many, many years. Detoxes, treatment centers, addiction specialists, homeopathic attempts, and I would never ever conclude that none of it worked because I didn't stay clean.
Right.
I denied, the self-awareness, but the ability to kind of look at my, at the time, my current outlook and position and willingness and all of those factors that would allow those resources to sort of work the way they should. Now, I mean, I'm 14 years clean, whatever that means for people. Like no narcotics, no substances, mind or mood altering, including alcohol, weed, like nothing. And I guess what I want to, like, where I stand today is I'm not really an advocate for recovery per se, or abstinent based, or the program that I personally do in my life, because I say I'm beyond that. But I would always want to say that I'm in recovery, and I want to ask you, because you just brought it up, and in my own opinion, it kind of worries me a little bit that it brings stigma to that word, that you would say you're not in recovery.
Yeah.
Right.
So
and that's the conversation I first want to have with you, because there's so much stigma around addiction, recovery, the solutions to it, the harm reduction resources to it. And I mean, when I think of, like I said, somebody recovering from a surgery, it's like, oh, great. How are you doing? Like, how you doing? It must have went well. Like, that really, recovery got this notion that it's only attached to 12 steps or abstinent based or something like that. And I mean, in my own personal opinion, it just means I'm a little bit better than I was yesterday. So I want your sort of opinion on that and your belief.
Yeah, that's a really good point that you brought up. And my intention is not to stigmatize recovery or say that it's something that people must move beyond, or that there's some kind of shame attached to being in recovery. I think my intentions underneath that are that addiction is not forever. In fact, actually just data backs that up. If we look at studies, it shows that the vast majority of people that do develop problematic substance use actually just outgrow it without even the help of treatment or AA or 12-step programs or anything. They literally mature out of their addiction. So my intention is saying, hey, addiction is not a lifetime curse. You don't have to live with it forever. It's more transient in nature for the vast majority of people. Of course, myself, and it sounds like yourself, we had very, very problematic drug use problems that required serious intervention. And so, yes, I'm not trying to communicate that there should be because the fear is there's complacency that can develop in a person's life where we forget where we were, and then the risk or the concern among others is that you could go back to that addiction. So yeah, not trying to undermine that in any way. Just for me as my personal journey, my story, I recognize how vulnerable I was for years. And when that shifted for me, when I recognized I wasn't in that same area of vulnerability anymore, I just recognized I'm free and clear. And it's a different thing. That's something that you can't tell people when that happens or if that will happen for them. They need to figure that out.
And I mean, I would want to describe addiction, or the ability and the hope of putting that behind anyone, as an utter possibility for anyone. And our show is called Talk Recovery. Giuseppe and I are involved in the Recovery Day, and this attempt at getting September as a recovery month across Canada. And in my heart of hearts, I don't want that word to be inclusive to people that go to meetings in churches. I want all the harm reduction resources to be there in support. I want every single resource, whether it's safe supply, safe injection sites. I want everybody, especially for the people that aren't directly themselves involved with addiction, that are just completely ignorant and naive to what to do. Because I find that sometimes a big problem is the coercion that seems to be there from interventionists or the first person of contact that says, this is what you got to do. This is how you have to handle it. And there's no other way. That is, I'm completely against that. There should be this sort of knowing, but that being said, all of us need to be on the same page. And what I've always said, there's always been a rift between harm reduction and people that, you know, are in recovery, that it's either one or the other. And, you know, we got to give, you know, respect to the people that, you know, want to keep using and keep them alive, which I completely agree. But also at the same point, there's many, many addicts that are stuck in the cycle of just harm reduction that don't access any other options or any other bridges. Do you agree? Do you think there's a problem in the middle, not with either recovery or harm reduction?
I completely agree. It's actually an area that I see is very close to my heart. I feel like I have a responsibility to bridge the gap between harm reduction and the recovery, the abstinence side of community. It's become almost a little bit too politically charged. Like the left tends to embrace the harm reduction approach and people advocate for that, as they should. And then the conservative right tends to say, you know, drugs are bad and everyone needs to be abstinent and we should coerce everybody into treatment. Or, you know, the far extreme, like create an island where everyone that has an addiction should go to for treatment. And it's just, they're so disconnected. We need to bridge this gap. Right. And it is a process. So if we recognize addiction and recovery as a process, then we can have grace for people in the process. So that doesn't mean that abstinence needs to occur tomorrow. You know, asking someone that, is a bit much sometimes. You know, for a lot of people, they need to have some stepping stones towards getting there. But I do want to say that I think there is a responsibility on the harm reduction advocates to embrace the need to help pull people towards a better life. And a lot of times in the way they communicate and the way they advocate for harm reduction, they neglect the fact that there is a desire in most people that struggle with addictions to overcome their addictions, to actually get out of it. They may not feel it on Monday morning or on any given time that you interact with them. But if you were to sit down and get them in a place where they can have a heart-to-heart with you, most people are not happy about their addiction. They're not happy about where they're at in life, and they're hopeless, and they're starting to feel like maybe there's no potential. And so if you're advocating harm reduction, you need to also be someone who's pulling that person towards something better. Gently, compassion.
Over the years, the advocacy involved in healthcare has really, you know, turned it into you're either this side or that side. I mean, you've got even the government, you know, when they make an announcement for funding for grants, they actually separate the funding. Like just a couple of weeks ago, you know, and she's a friend of mine, Minister Darcy, announces 15 million for recovery. Then 2 days later, 10 million for harm reduction. And it's like, why don't you just do a $25 million announcement for healthcare? Like, and why are we separating the two? And then, you know, I love Mom Stop the Harm. You know, they do a rally and it's all about safe supply. And I'm like, why don't we do a rally about safe supply? And the fact that, you know, there's a wait list for every treatment center in British Columbia. You know, why aren't the two together? And then, you know, I do my best to try to incorporate the entire continuum of care. And I remember talking to somebody at one of our conferences, Johan Hari, and I'm like, hey, like, why do you always talk about, you know, this? And why do he's interviewed some of the top experts in the world. Why do they only talk about safe supply? And he's like, because you need a soundbite. And I'm like, it's healthcare. Like, no, we don't. It's healthcare. Like you need a soundbite to sell a book, I guess. So I guess the question I got is what to our viewers that are listening, and some of them are people with lived experience, some of them have loved ones and so forth. You've launched this program, We All Play a Role. So what is We All Play a Role, and what is our role? You say you have a responsibility. I have the same passion. I can't go to bed at night knowing that I can do something to help change. So obviously you're up here and Darren's up here. Like, we're doing radio shows. Like, what's a mom's role? What's a role of somebody who's just, you know, at home?
Well, our goal with We All Play a Role was to partially educate the community at large. So for those of us who have had addictions or have loved ones with addictions, we tend to be fairly informed about the issues, and we understand the overdose crisis, and we understand maybe some of the roles we can play. for the rest of the community in Langley in particular, we were very surprised to discover how many people do not understand what is going on with the overdose crisis. They are not at all aware of the toxic drug supply. The perception that they have is that it is affecting only homeless people, that it's a downtown East End issue, that they're not recognizing what is really going on. Fentanyl has contaminated the drug supply. So we wanted to help people understand the issues and then recognize the roles they can play. One of the big ones that we emphasize and that I share from my own personal experience is the reduction of stigma around people who use substances and substances themselves. There's just such a stigma hierarchy about different drugs. When you think about addiction or people with addictions in our cultures, we tend to think those people look a certain way. I share from my own experience that when I was in addiction, I didn't really look a whole lot different than I do today. I didn't dress any different. I was always housed, always employed, always had a vehicle. And so it's changing the narrative. It's kind of breaking away from the way the media represents this issue with pictures of back alleys and needles on the ground and the homeless population, and saying, hey, overdose can affect anyone. Honestly, anyone that is using illicit substances today is at risk. We need to talk about these things matter-of-factly so we can break free from the stigma. We just need to talk about drugs like they're drugs. Drugs aren't bad or good. They're just drugs. They do a lot of good for people. They're used in medical context all the time. They help people live productive and healthy lives, but they can cause harm too. So we need to be a little more matter-of-fact about the way we discuss these things. And another big part of We All Play a Role is naloxone training and the distribution of naloxone kits and making sure people know how to use them and can have access to them.
And is this just for Langley, or are you doing it across the province, Canada?
Our funds limited us to Langley, more or less. However, we do have a vision to take it further. We are running towards the end of our initial 2-year grant. So we're looking for alternative funding opportunities. And if we can achieve some of those, then we would definitely like to expand beyond Langley area with this. And a big part of our presentations is personal stories. It's talking about how substances have affected us both in the context of addiction, but also in a recreational context, or just the reality that many people that do use drugs, both legal and illegal, don't develop addictions. And so we can be a little more matter of fact about these issues and not condoning drug use and not trying to bring it into a conversation where we're attempting to normalize it. We're just attempting to be realistic and honest about it.
Yeah. Now, we've always had the downtown East Side, as long as I can remember. That's the drug addict. That's where people die from using drugs. It's poverty. It's homelessness. It's that. And I think that ignorance has limited itself somewhat over the past few decades. But now, like, as you say, in Langley, I know that Langley specifically has been hit pretty hard as far as numbers in the overdose crisis in location, correct?
Yeah, that's right. We just tallied up since the crisis was declared. We've had 139 people between the city and township fatally overdose in Langley. Yes.
And are you privy to the sort of the background? Like, is it all the homeless population? Is it youth? What's the common denominator as far as demographic goes?
Men. 4 out of 5 are men. Actually, a lot of employed men. So obviously in the Fraser Health, we're seeing 75% plus are in private residences. So yeah, it affects all demographics, including the homeless, of course. But homeless are often living in very tight communities where they are familiar with one another and somewhat savvy about their substance use and have naloxone kits with them. The other side of the story is people like myself who had jobs that we wanted to not lose. And my drug use was always hidden. It was always behind locked doors in bathrooms or bedrooms where hopefully no one would find out about it. And, fentanyl had been the problem in the drug supply that it is today. When I was using, well, I probably wouldn't be sitting here chatting with you guys. So, by shining a light on this and helping people understand that the reason a lot of those people are hiding, and men who have jobs, is because they don't want to out themselves. They don't want the stigma that comes with acknowledging the substance use disorder that they're dealing with. They don't want to lose their jobs or all the other consequences that will.
That's a great point. I want to pick up on that soundbite because I want to ask you this. I've had this conversation with quite a few people, and it comes from the idea of a two-tiered healthcare system. So I remember talking to somebody who's got some pull. And it's like, yeah, we shouldn't be asking our employees if they're using drugs. And I was just like, are you serious? I'm like, I have a friend who's a crane operator that smoked crystal meth up, 40 stories high. Like, I'd like to know if he's using still, like there's this whole idea of safety. And I think we get lost somewhere in there where it's like, I have a lot of friends that work in construction, quite a bit. And like, how do we, like, I remember being at a workplace forum, and everybody said the number one reason why employees don't talk to their employer about substance use is stigma. And Darren and I have gone back and forth on this too. I'm like, that's not true. Like that like the truth is they don't want to be part of an occupational health and safety thing. Like, if you're using heroin and you're going to work on 2 hours later, like it's dangerous. How are we going to get through this? Because no one's talking about the truth. Like, everyone just says it's stigma, and it's like, wait a minute, like it's safety. So how, like, if you're somebody that works in safety, obviously, and parenting is one of the most things in the world that you need to be safe around. But let's talk about construction workplace. How are we going to solve that? Because I'm seeing that it's never going to get solved. I don't care how many billboards you put up. Like, somebody that is running a construction site is not going to go to a consumption site and use.
Well, I mean, I think we are, in our culture, we're a little too concerned about everybody's feelings, and we neglect personal responsibility. And obviously, yes, if you're a business owner, if you're running a construction site, you have a responsibility to ensure that that site is safe for the people around it and the people on it. And so we're concerned about stigma because stigma is what is hurting people's feelings. But sometimes we do need to separate these issues out a little further and consider the responsibility. And so even the person who is using substances, whether it's recreationally or problematically, they actually do have a responsibility as well. And we need to acknowledge that. And if they're using those drugs irresponsibly, then that needs to be addressed. And we cannot allow people to be intoxicated on construction sites. That's just reality. It's common sense. And so we need to inject a little more common sense into the conversation.
Yeah, and I bring it up too because there's a big push from a lot of unions to remove monitoring programs and all that. They're unethical, and I'm kind of like, well, I had to go through a monitoring program, years ago and all that, and I turned it into, like, I'm grateful I did because it helped me get through some difficult times. And I know a lot of people would say that, at the beginning I was like, screw this, but then you change a bit. Darren, we got a few minutes left before we need to get into our second guest. You got anything else?
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, this is just not enough time, to broach all of the conversations here. So as far as we all play a role, obviously, like, there was not too long ago, we wouldn't, like you said, we wouldn't be bringing up these conversations in a workplace because, I don't have employees that are at risk to OD. They party on the weekends and they don't bring it into work. And, and the people that are ODing are out there. But like this is a new day, and addiction hasn't changed, but the drugs have changed. Like you say, they're in, you know, the fentanyl's in the cocaine, it's in the meth, it's in the anything somebody isn't going to use again, but hey, it's Friday night and, you know, John brought some, so yeah, let's go. You know, is now a real risk. And, yes. and I mean, that's a big part of the conversation. And I'm so glad that you're starting a new dialogue for all types of employment agencies or, you know, companies. Is there any, like, is it just, are people calling up and saying, hey, come on by, I want to know how to handle this? Or they're sort of like still saying, we don't really need that right now?
Yeah, it's been a little of both. I mean, it really depends. We've definitely had to kind of be as aggressive as possible in the nicest way that we can to try and get our foot in the door. We've had a lot of rejections from businesses that are like, oh, we don't have anyone like that working here. And so that's obviously a denial and just naive ignorance as to the reality of drug use in our societies. But many people have embraced us, both with concern for their employees, but also with a concern for their community and what's going on outside the doors of their business. So, you know, we're getting the word out. We keep hitting the streets and dropping off letters and making phone calls. And the construction industry is one of the toughest to penetrate. Work hard, play hard. Also, dollars are the bottom line. And so stopping your operation for an hour and a half, no one's working and no money is coming in, so you can hear a presentation about the overdose crisis is not perhaps ideal, but we feel it's very valuable and necessary, and something I appreciate you guys taking the time to talk to me about today.
Yeah, I was amazed. I go to a human resources conference every year, except this one. And, you know, there's like 5,000 HR people there. We have our, you know, because I work at Last Door, we have this big, you know, occupational health booth for treatment. And you're talking to somebody and it's like, oh, yeah, we don't have addiction at our employment. And I'm like, how big's your operation? Oh, we have 10,000 employees. And I'm like, you have 10,000 employees and you don't think you have addiction? Because they don't want to admit that they have employees that, that idea that the employee would be not a productive employee. It's unfortunate. I mean, everyone's just arguing about what to do to fix this overdose crisis. And until we have some unity and some real innovative ideas that, you know, we all need to work together, I'm really having a hard time seeing another end to this. So if somebody wants to connect with you, Daniel, how do, what do we, just give you a call? Do you have a website?
Yeah, so We All Play a Role is on Facebook at We All Play a Role Langley. Also, my advocacy and recovery conversations are on my Facebook at DGA Snyder and Twitter at Daniel Snyder 1. Feel free to call or email. Yeah, all the contact information is there. So would love to chat with anyone about anything that we've talked about today.
Thank you, Daniel.
Yeah.
Once again, We All Play a Role Langley. And I think even if you're not in Langley, look it up, have a conversation and see if again, We All Play a Role Langley. I think even if you're not in Langley, I'm hearing my voice come back again here. Conversation. Thanks, Daniel.
You bet, guys. Thank you very much. Take care. Have a great day.
Okay, Daniel, take care. And you can take a look at Daniel's links in our Facebook page and on our website so you can connect with them. Take care, Daniel. Thanks for joining us on Talk Recovery Radio. You're listening to Talk Recovery Radio on 100.5 FM, or you're watching us on Facebook Live. And 6 seasons, hundreds of guests, thousands of listeners. Thanks to everybody who has helped our show get moving. You know, a little shout out to Frances Stone. I haven't, her name popped up on my feed today. And so I was just like, hey, shout out to Frances, and who was part of our show for a few years. Powered by New West Recovery, which is Canada's recovery community made up of Last Door Recovery Society and Westminster House. Now we've got our second guest. Hello, Chris. Hello, Deb.
Hello. Hi.
Hello.
We've got audio everywhere. Awesome. Welcome to the show, Deb and Chris. Really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Oh, you know what? I've got one of those t-shirts too, right over here. Yes. This is the The Gnome Project. Oh,
Oh,
sorry,
Darren.
Darren.
Where's my swag?
Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, we're gonna have to fix that. We're gonna have to fix that.
Absolutely.
I am so excited.
Deb and Chris, moms of loved ones in recovery. Thanks for being on our show. You've started a new grassroots project, which I love because it's people driven. And I also love the fact, like, hey, Giuseppe, we got this idea. Usually follows up with like, can you connect our website? Can you do Facebook? But you guys did it all yourselves. So it's like, I love ideas that people actually do themselves. So right on, good for you. What is the Gnome Project, Recovery Gnome Project?
Well, first of all, thanks so much for having us on. As you know, I'm a huge fan of the show. And one of the reasons I am a big fan is because you talk recovery. And there's lots of stuff out there on recovery, but frankly, I've really found you have to dig a bit to find it. It's just not as in your face as some other aspects of the addiction path story, the addiction crisis. That's kind of fits right in with what we want to talk about today, and actually a little bit with your previous guest as well. I really enjoyed his talk. So what we plan to do is tell you a little bit about the Recovery Gnomes Project, how it came to be, what it is, and how people can get involved. Okay, so here we go. As you've mentioned, I'm a mom who, like many families, has some impact from addiction as part of my story and recovery. And as a result of that, I find myself spending lots of time with other moms who have a similar story or similar experiences. And, we talk a lot. We talk about a lot of stuff, but a topic that comes up a lot is there seems to be very little attention and discussion paid on recovery, addiction recovery, like in any of our news networks or media in general. It just doesn't, for some reason, get the airtime. You talked previously about sound bites and that kind of stuff. It just doesn't get the coverage that other aspects of addiction do on a daily basis. So I want to say I'm not here to minimize in any way the tragedy of addiction. It's clear to all of us how sad that is. However, I'm here to say that there's a huge group of us out there that feel that families need some hope. I would say they also need the facts. And I would say that the facts really is there's a whole lot of addiction recovery that surrounds all of us everywhere, every day. But it's kind of hard to see. So we think that shedding light on addiction recovery is a really important part of fully addressing the whole addiction crisis, and it needs a lot more attention than it's getting. So September is Recovery Month. We want to celebrate. And actually, you mentioned all the stuff we did with our project. It's only been 2 weeks since we came up with this idea on a dog walk. And I know Chris is going to tell you all about it.
Yeah, so we've been asked since in these last 2 weeks, like, why gnomes? What do gnomes have to do with recovery? And they do, believe it or not. So the inspiration came to us, as Deb mentioned, while we were for a walk. We went for a walk and we were in the woods and we found all these beautiful little painted pebbles. And they were around the base of a tree. And I mentioned to her, oh, this really reminds me of these little gnomes that were painted on small little blocks of wood that started appearing all around a city in the States that I used to live in. And no one knew who was putting these little gnomes there. And interestingly enough, the person still remains anonymous today. But the whole city fell in love with them. And the utility company that was the receiving end of these little gnomes decided that they wanted to take them all down. And the city rallied and the mayor rallied and they said, no, we love these gnomes. They're everywhere. They bring us so much joy. Let's leave them up. So this made Deb and I think about how recovery is everywhere and how it surrounds us. And it's always quietly impacting us in such positive ways. So the gnome, why gnomes come into the recovery is that they're actually symbols of good luck and hope. And they are the guardians of treasure. And really, really, what is greater treasure than that of the gift of recovery? And so as people who have witnessed family members, loved ones, partners, friends struggle through the chaos of addiction, we know firsthand that recovery is something that really needs to be valued and guarded and nurtured. And so we decided as the Recovery Gnome Project that we're going to celebrate recovery, and we're going to inspire conversations, learning, and hope around it. And we already have, and similar to what Daniel just said, that people don't understand, as Deb and I have been caught putting gnomes out and starting conversations with people, people don't know about recovery. They only know what they see on the news, which is the negative, right? These people are dying, da, 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 da. But because the nature of recovery is very anonymous, we just, it's not like we walk around the street saying, hey, I'm in recovery. And so we're hoping that we can show the world that recovery is everywhere by putting these little gnomes out, and we're going to be mapping them, and we can go to a map and you can see them all across BC and hopefully further.
Okay. And there's a passion behind this, a bit of a personal story backgrounder. I know both of your stories, and like the healthcare system didn't say, hey, Deb, hey, Chris, oh, your son's addicted to drugs. There's this thing called recovery. Let us show you opportunities. Is that what happened in your life?
Oh, I have to say, I've been asked this question a lot, and I've spoken about it a lot. And I have to be super honest. I think the two things that really were significant in our particular situation were luck and money.
Yep.
And I'm really sad to have to say that.
Chris, would you say the same?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
So everybody watching and listening, you probably follow our Facebook pages and all that. Like, why do you do Recovery Month? Why do you do Recovery Day? Why? Because I know when Chris, I just know the hospital told you to leave and gave you no support and just gave your kid, who's a teenager, obviously medications are great, not against medication, but that's all they did. There was no idea, there was no plan of recovery. It's just like, take this medication and it's none of your mom's business. And it's a teenager. And in Deb's goo, it's like, oh, your kid, just needs to be on medication and good luck with that. That's the passion that I really admired. It's like you had this horrible experience with the healthcare system. Moms and dads are still going through that. And unless you have money, people ask, why do you charge for addiction healthcare? Because the government ain't paying for it, and that's why you needed those interventions done and so forth. So is this project, based in trying to get people out there to know there are options?
Well, we wanted to represent in a fun, non-threatening, anonymous, if you want to be kind of way, a representation of how prevalent recovery is. And that's the balancing piece. I like analogies. They help me kind of sort out crazy things. And one I've been thinking of is, it's a lot like treading water. I think a lot of our system is really, really, really focused on saving lives and treading water. You can't tread forever. I want to invest in swimming, and we might have recreational swimmers. We might have full-on Olympic champion swimmers and everything in between, but nobody can tread water forever.
And those that don't even know how to swim.
Yeah.
And to follow suit with that analogy, each one of those individuals need a specific guide or teacher or coach, to get them to that next level, to keep them in the water, to get to the other side. And I mean, that again, it's what Recovery Day has been all about in my hopes. And, when you talk about luck and money sort of being the basis that you both sort of are sitting here today, I mean, isn't the truth that there really isn't the same options for those that aren't feeling lucky, and that don't have money. And that, with that being said, if you ran into a mom in those same circumstances, like they have no leverage with their child that's out there. They have no ability to threaten a consequence, let's say, or pay anything. How can you help? What do you say? I mean, is it just left to hope, or is there something that like you do without the government making a move, without the hope of anything actually happening? Is there something you both have come to do in those circumstances?
Well, your previous guest said we all have a role to play.
Yeah.
And I think we do. I can't fix that problem, but I think, I worked in healthcare for 38 years, and I don't see strokes handled that way. I don't see MIs handled that way. We don't take people in the emergency room and bust their clots and send them out the door and say goodbye, good luck. That's what I kind of see here. So the role that we all have to play is to understand what's going on here and be outraged that we're not investing in the whole trajectory as opposed to the front end. And
what about you, Chris?
Well, I have to agree with Deb. I was fascinated by what she was saying. I'm like, yes, I agree with you there. I feel like being able to, if we get back to the Recovery Gnome Project, that simple little gnome is a symbol of hope, and it is a conversation. And people that we've been meeting so far aren't even aware of what recovery is, or that recovery is an option. And I know that we were very fortunate because we had the wallet or the credit card that was able to back our children's recovery. But I agree with Deb that you have to be loud about it. You have to say, hey, look at all these gnomes, they're everywhere. Why can't my child get that? Why can't my loved one get that as well?
My loved one deserves it too.
Of course.
We all deserve it and so forth. And I always have this fundamental belief when I used to answer the phones quite often here where I work, and it's kind of like once the mom or dad starts a recovery journey, it's like the gig's up. You know what I mean? It's just like, I know what you're doing, and I love you. I don't support this, but I love you. Like something happens there, and not to say, what's that word called again? Tough love, whatever that conversation is. I mean, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's just the conversation. Sometimes recovery is just, a lot of small conversations, and the individual gets inspired. I believe, I mean, people have been helping people since the beginning of time. The idea that only a doctor can help you is ridiculous. He's part of that care, but there was this big ad campaign. I don't know if any of you ever saw it, but just from going to conferences and stuff, huge ads. Your doctor understands addiction. Huge ads, they were everywhere. This is probably going back 10 years. And I was just like, I remember going to the doctor and it was just like, he was my script doctor. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, he understands it.
Yeah, we need full wraparound attention to this, just by the nature of the condition. The ability to make decisions being difficult, all of that. When someone is ready, and that's a conversation for another day. I don't necessarily think they always need to be ready, but if someone's showing they're ready, good Lord, this is a medical emergency. We don't treat other medical emergencies, this way. I just thought of something, often our governments are interested in the impact, the financial impact. And my son said something to me one day, and I want to mention this, since he's been in recovery, he said, Mom, I've paid more in taxes since I've been in recovery than you paid for my recovery. And I thought, wow, that's a really interesting thing. Maybe the funders would be interested to know how much the tax base might be tapped into if we supported people through the full trajectory more than the initial acute, very serious phase that we see.
Well, I mean, there's a diagram out there. You know, the amount of money, 5 of the top nonprofit charities in the downtown East Side. We're talking about a 5-block radius. Over $100 million in government money. Like I think it's actually more than that. I'll put the chart on our Facebook page, but somebody sent it to me, and that's every year. Just like, you know, we're talking about you know, a big expense to taxpayers. So, what do you want people to do?
Yeah, Chris, tell them.
We want you to make gnomes and put them out there. Deb has some in the background here. There's no bad gnome. You don't have to be an artist. Any little shape that inspires you will work. We just ask that if you put one out, just try and make it something that can withstand the weather, as it is a little rainy here, and go put it anywhere, within reason, of course, respecting other people's property, and somewhere that can be visible. We want people to be able to find it and see it. And if you yourself are in recovery, if you feel like putting your name on it or putting your clean date, go for it. If not, that's totally fine. If you're putting one out representing a family member, friend, loved one, just don't put a name on it. Just put maybe sister, brother, mother, son, just so that people can look at it and say, oh, look at that. You know, it is all around. If you find one, take a picture of it, send it to us. Instagram, #Recovery Gnome Project.
Basically, if you Google Recovery Gnome Project, that's the tag you need for everything, for our website, for our email address is info@, and I think we can put some stuff up in the notes. Is that right? And then the #Recovery Gnome Project.
Yeah.
I mean, I love anything that is inspired by addiction recovery, hope, the conversation. So if someone sees this,
yeah,
will they recognize that it's about that's sort of the topic that, you know, perhaps can, you know, get in touch with someone, or is this you know, sort of the premise of people that are involved in recovery, and let's show numbers and let's show, you know what I mean? I can just imagine right now, so, you know, a mom watching that, like you said, doesn't have the money, isn't going to see a solution in their child's life anytime soon, perhaps, and has lost hope. Is there a way of getting some provision of help or a conversation with that?
So I'll give you a little example. I was visiting some friends, and I was discussing the whole Recovery Gnome Project with this friend. And she's very well aware of our family situation. And she too has friends and family members who either have not yet found their way to recovery or are in recovery. And she was just fascinated by it. And she told me, oh, well, my goddaughter would love to know about this too. So I left her a gnome. And the very next day, I got this excited phone call from them and a bunch of pictures. She and her goddaughter had gone out and they had found the gnome I had left, and they busily put the other gnome right next to it. While they were doing that, a family walked up, and there was a little girl, and the little girl's like, "Mommy, look at this, how cute." And because we had just talked about this, my friend and her goddaughter were able to have this lovely discussion with this other family and the little girl all about recovery, what recovery is, what it consists of. And so that was our mission right there, is just to spread the word, spread it so that becomes just a normal, everyday part of conversation. Boom.
And that is like right down before any government funding or any sort of professional, you know, cure invention that's come out, like before any of that. And Daniel Snyder said it at the top of the show too, is to normalize the conversation. And as mothers, you know, and I've had this feeling myself now as a father, like, you know, our lives become about what our kids are doing. And it's great when my kid's in college and, you know, and he's just got a job here or a promotion there, or he's, you know, he's got the captain on the hockey team, or she's, you know, got accepted into dance class, what, like that's what parents want to talk about. And then, you know, the other parent in the room, oh, well, yeah, my son just got into rehab today. And because it's attached to embarrassment or perhaps shame. I mean, of course it seems, but at the same time, why can't that parent talk about it? You know, and why can't they have the invitation to talk about it? Why be a competition? And why does it have to be a topic that's a secret when it's the most important topic? It's more important that your kid getting into college, that your kid's got a promotion. You know, you possibly have a child that is getting sick. And
I'd like to make a comment here, Darren. I am so glad you're saying this, because that's why what you're doing with this NOME project, Recovery Day, is so important. Because if you go back in time, if you had AIDS, like, you didn't tell anybody. If you had cancer, you didn't tell anybody. If you had, you know, if you were gay, you didn't tell your, you know, the family picnic, oh, our son's dating, you know, a guy named Steve. Like, you would never say that. You can now, and because people have unlearned their philosophies and beliefs about what these words mean. And I think the problem is there's been such a push from certain groups that the word addict is bad. And the word, you know, this is, and we got to change everything. And you have all these people that are in recovery that are labeled addict and alcoholics that are pretty fine with it, being like, what's wrong with my label? Like, we're just confused. Like, we're going down this road where, like, when I realized what my issues were, and I read this book and I did this work, and I'm an addict, like I got so much relief from it, and I'm still being told not to, like, publicly say I'm an addict in recovery. It's just crazy. So that's why we got to be super loud, because people who aren't Deb and Chris, you know, like, you've learned what recovery is. Like, our role, all of us, is to help people understand, like, recovery is life. Recovery is great. Like, if I say, you know, my son's in recovery, it should be like, oh, that's amazing. Not like, oh, you know, like it's something bad. And somebody pointed out, you know, we launched a new website on another project I'm working on. It's all about addiction and so forth. But the image is all these beautiful people, and they're like, I'm so glad you didn't put a picture of people using. I'm like, because, well, that's not what it's about recovery, you know, and all that kind of stuff. So until we need to make Recovery Month, you know, and recovery days like holidays, like Pride Day. And until we do that, like, people just don't know. You know, I talked to Nuno in Portugal, and I said, you know, this country where, you know, drugs are decriminalized and there's apparently no stigma in Portugal. There's a lot of stigma in Portugal. Mm-hmm. And I asked them, like, so what do the Portuguese people think about the Portuguese model? It's like, they don't even know what it is. Like, everybody in Canada talks about it. You go up to a Portuguese person, they're like, what are you talking about? Like, they don't even know it unless your kid gets caught using drugs. Then you find out what the Portuguese model. But, like, I can go from here to downtown Vancouver and ask 100 people what the Portuguese model, they all have an interpretation about it. If I go to Portugal, ask the same question, they'll be like, what's wrong with you? So it's one of those things where we need to put the recovery experience in people's faces. And you know, I applaud you for doing that in the world of recovery for moms and dads, because, like you said, so many of them have absolutely no clue.
Well,
Thank you. We're just getting started too. Yeah. I just want to say, and we hope people will get caught up in this. And do you want to know how you can win a t-shirt?
Oh, we got a prize?
So we've got V-neck, some round neck ones, and I guess we'll put some information up on the notes. But for the first 5 people who actually create a gnome, and they don't have to be fancy, don't get put off. I didn't think I could paint it all, and now I'm learning. And put it out in your community and send it to us with the hashtag, or post it with the hashtag Recovery Gnome Project, no S. We will make sure that we get in touch and make arrangements to get a t-shirt to the first five.
Awesome. Darren, make it known. Maybe you'll get a t-shirt.
Yeah, I have to win it.
You can also buy the shirts.
Yes.
Okay, and they're on your website. Awesome. You're listening to Talk Recovery Radio, coming to you live every Thursday, 100.5 FM if you're on the radio, and Facebook Live right now due to COVID. The studio almost opened up. They actually sent us an email saying studio's open, and then they closed it again 4 days later because the numbers are going up. Darren and I really don't want to go to the studio and share these microphones with a bunch of people, so we decided to just stick to the format until our world gets back to normal. If you like what you're listening, like us on Facebook, and you can catch all of our replays, SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes. Darren?
And support the Co-op radio station, because we want it there. We want it continue. Hundreds of shows, diversity of Vancouver. It's very important. I want to thank our first guest, Daniel Snyder from We All Play a Role, Langley.com, or sorry, We All Play a Role Langley on Facebook, and Chris and Deb from the Recovery Gnome Project. Thanks so much. And I'm just going to leave with recovery. Whatever your first idea, your first thought or opinion, when you hear that word, the definition of restoration or return to any former and better state or condition. And that's all we want it to be. It's not given to any specific resource or program. That is just, we want you to be a part of that word if you are getting better, trying to be better, and looking to get better. So join the movement, because we're not going away.
No.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take care, everyone. Bye.